A number of researchers in their papers argue that on a global scale, many children are not being taught, practiced, or nurtured innovation, critical and creative thinking skills, and that they are falling behind with test grades. Do you think that neuroeducation may provide one critical element towards a solution?
I fully agree with your assessment that we do not do enough in schools to excite higher order thinking. One of the reasons for that is that I'm not sure what it's like in Malta, but certainly in many schools and countries I've been in, the curriculum, especially in the secondary schools, is so jammed with stuff that the teachers have to go at a pretty fast pace in order to cover it in the time allotted. And I don't know, what is the school year in Malta? Is it
very similar? It's very similar.
September to May or June? Yeah.
It's from October to June, but we have Easter recess and Christmas recess as well. So you have to take off the holidays from there. So teachers need to cram the curriculum within, so many days throughout. We have 3 months of summer holidays, in fact.
So they have to talk pretty fast to cover all that stuff.
And it ends up being a traditional approach,
What you do is just tell the students what the curriculum says. And telling people what you know is very different from teaching. Because in many college classrooms, professors stand up there, they tell you what they know and they leave. That's not teaching, in my opinion, because teaching implies learning. Just like the practice of medicine implies curing, healing. You can't say I practice medicine, but none of my patients survive. Then you're not doing it, are you? And I've had teachers say to me, I taught it, but they didn't learn it. Well, then you didn't teach it. If you taught it, they didn't learn it, then you didn't teach it. You just told them what you knew. The idea is to present information in a way that they will learn it, and they will be eager to learn it and be actively learning it. So one way to deal with this is to take a look at the curriculum and get rid of the junk that's in it. Because we find that over years, curriculum is like a vacuum cleaner. It sucks up stuff more and more.
Yes.
So the school year stays the same length.
That's it.
And so if you've got to cover more stuff in the same amount of time, you got to talk faster. You got to move faster.
Yes.
And when you move faster, you can't do higher order thinking. Higher order thinking takes time. And time is our biggest enemy in schools. And when you say to teach, and I've had many say, I don't have time to do creative stuff. I don't have time to do analysis and evaluation and creativity because I get so much stuff. It takes too much time. I get so much stuff to cover. Then I say, get rid of the junk that you got to cover. Because frankly, a lot of the content that we teach in schools will be outdated by the time these kids graduate. What we should be teaching them is not stuff to learn, but how to learn. But how to learn.
Yes,
skills of how to learn.
Yes.
Because when they get out, we're teaching these kids right now, we're trying to teach them for jobs that don't exist. Think of all the jobs that exist today that didn't exist 5 years ago. So the bottom line is that we shouldn't be teaching them stuff that will be outdated. I'm sure there are some basics like language and mathematical calculations and history of your country and that kind of stuff, basic stuff. But a lot of stuff isn't basic. It's just fluff that somebody threw in there when they were redoing the curriculum because that was their favorite topic. And that's got to go. And take the stuff that really matters and go deeply into it and spend the time to develop those higher order thinking skills, because that's what's going to save the world. It's not going to be rote memory. It's going to be thinking creatively, thinking outside the box. Because if it were just a simple answer, we would have solved it already. But how do we solve overpopulation of the world, climate change, less drinking water, all the other things that are really determining whether we're going to survive as a species? Those kinds of problems require creativity. And in order to do that, you've got to start in the schools. You've got to honor creativity rather than saying, I don't have time for it.
So many children find it very difficult to transfer their past learning to new situations of learning. In your book, you mentioned two types of transfer, the transfer during learning and the transfer of learning. Can you explain these transfers and why the skill of transfer is so crucial?
Transfer is probably one of the most critical elements and principles of learning. In fact, I devote a whole chapter to it in my book called The Power of Transfer. Why is that so critical? Because transfer occurs two ways, as I mentioned, during learning. Whenever you present new information or skill to a brain, the first thing it does is look back into long-term storage to see if I already know something about this, or if I already have a skill that can help learning this new skill. That's transfer. That's transfer during learning. Transfer during learning is when past learning comes into working memory, which is the temporary memory, and tries to make sense and meaning out of the new learning. And when it does that, then it's more likely for the students to say, aha, that makes sense to me, I get it. And they're more likely to save it and store it for the long haul. That's transfer during learning. Transfer of learning is being able to use what you learned in school to solve new problems. Kids says, why do I have to learn the multiplication table? Because when you get out in the real world, at some point, you're going to have to be able to do multiplication without a computer in your hands. You're going to do it up here. That's why. Because it's going to be useful to you in the future. So one of the main reasons we try to talk about transfer of learning is because the human brain is more likely to save learning if it believes it can be useful to it in the future. Remember, its job is to keep you alive, keep you successful, move through the universe and successfully and without being injured. And so whatever it senses that something can be useful to me to help my owner in the future, the chances are it'll save it. So we do transfer of learning to show students, by the way, we're learning this today because at some point in the near future, this can be useful to you.
Yes.
Same thing with emotional learning. Why do we teach kids about their emotions? Because they can get carried away. They can cause problems. They can cause problems for you. And so we have to teach them about the way that the frontal lobe can control their emotions so that they don't do something silly. And the more they know about how that works, the better they are too.
That's it. So from a neurological point of view, what benefits are there for students to learn the creative arts? What impacts do they have on their learning and behavior?
Well, one of the things I find in schools is, as I've mentioned already, is that we don't do enough with creativity. We don't. And by the way, one of the things we've learned about the brain over the years is that you can teach creativity. You can teach people to be creative. We used to think that was fixed, like intelligence. Remember, we say you got your IQ score, that's it. You either have it or you don't. Well, we knew 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that's not true. That we can expand
Yes.
or contract our intellectual capabilities. Same thing with creativity. We say either you're creative or you're not. Well, there certainly are, just as with intelligence, there certainly are genetic contributions to intelligence, genetic predispositions to intelligence, and genetic predispositions to creativity. But they're not limits. They're just predispositions. They don't say that's as far as you can go. We can expand those limits. And we can teach people to be more intelligent. We can teach people to be more creative. We don't do that in schools, not very much. Only in the arts, because the arts are, the basis of the arts is creativity. So I don't know, do you have the STEM
Yes,
process?
we do. Yes, we do.
So I've written a book, STEM to STEAM, Because one way to make the STEM subjects more meaningful to kids is to show the creativity part of it.
Yes.
So I recommend that you infuse the arts into STEM subjects. Because look at it this way. Many great advances in science, in math, in engineering, and in technology were made when you thought outside the box, when you didn't follow the rules, when you brought something in out of nowhere and said, you know what, maybe this will work. Oh, never thought of that before. Creativity is the basis of the STEM subjects, because whenever you're creating something in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, whenever you're creating something, you're doing something that's outside the box, something new, something that hasn't been explored before, putting things together in a different way that no one ever thought of before. So I think that if you introduce the creative arts into STEM subjects, well, into any subject, it provokes the brain to think at higher levels. And by the way, it's a lot more interesting. I mean, kids like to create things, and they know, and you know what? We do it in kindergarten, we do it in first and second grade. We try to, they were always doing creative things, draw what you think this animal should look like. And then after that, sorry,
it stops.
Stop. We got too much stuff to cover.
Yes.
In kindergarten, in first grade, if a student says, gee, I think I could do it this way, the teacher says, oh, good, show me. Let me see the way you can do that. Once you get into middle school, the kid says, I think I have another way to do this. The teacher says, sorry, we don't have time for it. We got to keep moving on.
Yes.
You got stuff to cover, as one guy always said. I don't have time for the brain. I got stuff to cover. That was probably one of the more ridiculous statements I've ever heard.